did this ourselves.
They're coming. It can't be.
Where is everyone?
Hello, survivors. Makeshift here with the very first episode of the Apocalypse Postcast for 2022, or 2020 Take 3, 2020 version 3. What surprises do we have coming for us this year? I'm sure all of you want to know. I have no idea. But I will say it's going to keep getting better or worse. It's going to keep changing, and we're going to keep adapting because that's what we do. We are the planet's alpha predator because we are the most able to adapt. You, my friend, are an apex predator, unless you're a vegetarian, in which case you just dominate them plants. But what I'm trying to say is we're going to continue to adapt. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to get smarter. We're going to get better. We're going to have better science. And if the end of the world does happen in 2022, you're going to be ready. Why? Because you listen to this show. Actually, listening to this show has no impact on your ability to survive. This is a nerd show where we talk about all things post-apocalyptic culture. But we do talk about some real world scenarios too. And that's what today's guest is going to bring up. I got a few more things to talk about, but I can't wait to introduce you. His name is Andy the Elf, and he is a wonderful woodland creature. He is a forest elf who just absolutely knows how to survive on the land. He knows what to look for. He knows his plants. He knows what's poisonous and what's not. He knows about what trees you're going to want to be near, what area of the country, if you're in the United States, although this applies anywhere. He knows where to live, where not to live, and even if you get stuck in like a Fallout New Vegas scenario, he's pretty confident that he could survive it. And I think you could too. I'm just going to kind of ramble here for another minute before we bring him in, because it's the new year. I'm really excited. The show's doing well. The numbers continue to grow, and I have been hard at work to put together the first full episode of The Legends of Wasteland City. That is the narrative version of this show that's going to be coming out really soon. Probably in the next month or so, we'll get it started. And then it's going to be an anthology. So I think what's going to happen is once we start it, it's going to keep going. It'll be week after week of the anthology until that story's done. And then I'll go back to the normal format for the in-betweeners. We'll bring in guests. I'll talk about shows and movies and stuff. And then when the next part is ready, we'll go into that. That's my hope anyway. We'll see how it goes. But I'm really excited about it. I just sent over the scripts to the voice actors who are going to be playing a few of the characters. And just to get you guys hyped up on it a little bit, this is going to be the Schofield's Drifters. They have a 6 or 7 part, I forget exactly right now. It's a longer story involving many characters. In that little teaser I put out at the end of 2021, you guys heard a scene with Doc Schofield and Digits. Now, these are 2 real people who created characters for Wasteland Weekend. And along the way, they've been building out their backstories, and that has taken them down this path of actually writing out some of these historical stories so that they have that backstory to add to their character when they're at Wasteland Weekend. Now, it doesn't mean that all this stuff's happening at Wasteland Weekend, but this is how their relationships with other characters have been built. Their contractors, the other tribes that they have deals with or bad history with, that kind of stuff. So a lot of tribes have done this, and that's where I want this show to go, is to kind of theaterize, to actualize. It's not actual, but yeah, we'll call it that. To just kind of bring alive some of these stories that have been written out over the years. So we're going to start with that, the Schofield's Drifters story. I have a 1-part story from Rabbit Asylum that we're going to do. That one's really fun. And I've been writing an original story involving the Dukes of the Nuke that is currently at 7 chapters, 8 chapters, something like that. So we're going to get that going too. But I don't want to give up on the show as it is either, so we're going to keep peppering things in along the way. We're just adding to it. We're not changing the show. Because a couple people were like, "Are you going to change the format completely?" I was like, no. It's just adding to it. There's going to be just all new stuff. What else? The Wasteland Weekend event maps have done really great. I'm super excited about it. I ordered a lot of them, and I think I've sold over 100 already, which is kind of cool, a little unexpected, but amazing. But I still have some. And so starting, let's see, you guys listening to this on Thursday, the map's on sale. Boom. And it's actually on sale starting Monday, MLK Day. We'll do an MLK sale because why not? It's a holiday. I've got maps and you guys need them. So here's your deal. So I'm taking them 25% off. 25? Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, 25% off because right now they're $20. But with the sale, they're 16, and all you gotta do is pay some shipping and they'll come out to you. What's really cool about the maps is the whole event is on there, and I know that not the whole event because some of the photos that I got from the drone were actually on Thursday when not everyone was there yet. A little unfortunate, but it's something I can correct for future. But yeah, you can see your camp, you can see your tribe, you can see your block from above, kind of map it out. And I think it's really cool. I think it'll be a cool reference point for the future too, because I know with the Dukes of the Nuke, we almost always will reference one of these overhead photos that I get almost every year, just to help us with the layout of our camp and how things fit and the actual size of things. So that's been a great reference for us. And I got a feeling that Wasteland Weekend itself is probably going to use this map at some point to help out. Because, you know, if you look at like Google Earth, you only see the desert. The chances of them actually firing off those shots while the event's taking place is really slim. However, this is the way Wasteland Weekend actually was in a moment of time in 2021. So yeah, if you're thinking about it, pick it up. It's at theapocalypsepost.square.site, I believe. I will link that in the show notes below. And then just find the map. You'll see the sale all over it for this week. You know, if you're listening to this later, it's probably not going to be on sale. So the store moves in real time. If I sell out of something, I don't always replace it because I get bored and I want to try new things. Anytime you guys buy something from the shop, it is a huge help for me producing the show. Not only does it help me to fund it and put aside the time to actually record and edit and upload and share and find guests and research and all that kind of stuff. But it also just is a huge encouragement to me every time someone does a sale or signs up on the Patreon. It's just really inspiring. So I thank you guys so much for that. Also, I have not gotten into it, but today on Netflix, I think The Colony, which is it's a European show. It's a European movie, but it's in English. So you don't have to deal with subtitles or anything, but it's a post-apocalypse. Evidently, the Earth was ravaged by famine and pandemic and all sorts of stuff, and the elite left on a spaceship, and they sent back this one ship to go see if while they're up on their escape ship, for some reason they can't reproduce anymore. And so they send someone back to Earth to see if they can reproduce. I don't know all the details yet, but here's what's crazy, guys. When I first got into filmmaking, I made this web series called Alpha Planet. Guess what? It was post-apocalyptic and a little bit sci-fi as well, but it had a very similar theme. Mine was the Earth was ravaged and everybody left. The entire population, which was diminished at that point, left on an Ark spaceship. So we're talking, maybe 1 million people that were left are all on this Ark spaceship, and they're trying to find another planet. And while they're like gallivanting through the universe, they send out like probes to see if certain planets that they happen to be nearby are inhabitable. If the probe comes back with any kind of positive idea, then they'll send a manned crew to go check things out. And so eventually they're running out of planets, and the probes that they're sending back to Earth are looking kind of positive. And so they sent back a single mission, which they lost communication with, and Alpha Planet picks up where the second mission is just about reaching Earth. Anyway, the parallels to this movie Colony are a lot. I'm not like I'm trying to say that they stole my idea, because I know they didn't, and besides the fact that Alpha Planet was not really all that original anyway, I took a ton of inspiration from Mad Max and Star Trek and Star Wars and all sorts of stuff, but it's actually kind of cool because I made Alpha Planet, almost 15 years ago now, and I'm not an incredible writer. I don't know, it's just kind of cool because, like, all right, I had an idea there. There was something going on. Anyway, I'm going to take it as a compliment that Alpha Planet is really awesome, and you guys should go find it. It's actually on YouTube. Just look up Alpha Planet. Bear with me because it's early makeshift work. The actors are stellar, but the camera work is meh, and the sound is meh, and the script, I think the script's okay. It could work. If you put them all together into like a pilot, I think there's something there. It needs to be workshopped. Hopefully I would do it better today. Anyway, check out The Colony. I'm going to try to watch it this week, and I'll let you guys know what I think. And then next week's episode, I'm going to try to do a nice little review on Station 11. I loved this show. So tune in next week. But that's it. Okay. Anyway, I've rambled on more than enough. I want to get to the show. It's going to be a fun episode. Andy is very knowledgeable, and he's kind of quirky, and I think you guys are going to love the hell out of it. And I'm just going to get right into it. 10 minutes later. Yeah. Good job, Makeshift. Anyway, here we go, guys. There was a time in the long before when you could go down to your local supermarket and get yourself a week's worth of fresh veg, milk, eggs, and my favorite, meat. That kind of eating's tough to find out here in the wasteland, but here at Dead Raider Jerky, we're changing that. We got so much fresh meat we don't even know what to do with it anymore. Ever since we started killing raiders on sight, they keep showing up too, talking about wanting our stuff, waving around guns like they're even loaded. Well, Wastelanders, we take pride in bringing you the freshest, best-tasting protein you can feel good about. Dead Raider Jerky. Fuck it. Let's eat the bastards.
Fuck it, Let's Eat the Bastards t-shirts, now available in the Apocalypse Outpost at theapocalypsepost.square.site.
All right, guys. Well, my guest today is a huge advocate for permaculture. He goes on plant walks, teaching people about all the foods that you can find in the world, along with like natural medicines and all sorts of different stuff that we're going to find out all about. And he's got this term on his resume called eco-encouragement. We're going to find out what that means. I discovered him through a recent event I was so lucky to get an invite to. This was actually right after Wasteland Weekend 2021. On my way back from California, I stopped at my buddy's land just a little bit west of Nashville for an event called Food Forest Adventure. And this man was co-hosting and helping to teach a whole lot of classes. So, guys, welcome to the show. One of my most unique guests so far. His name is Andy the Elf. Hey, Andy, how are you?
Hey, greetings. Great to be here with you.
I'm so glad to have you. And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So
excited to see what we talk about here. And there's so much.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So why don't you start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been doing plant walks, edible medicinal plant walks, since about 2001. I had just finished doing some herbal school programs and education. 2001, when the towers came down, I was out in the field digging Echinacea roots. So that's, a time period that really kind of shifted things into a different focus for me. Prior to that, I had been, a guy that climbed up trees so that they wouldn't get cut down if they were like 900,000-year-old trees.
Yeah. And
supported efforts with things like that. And went to a lot of protests where I found myself saying, no this, no that. And, coming across permaculture and, these other ways of being that I could say yes to, I wanted to be able to share that with people and teach that in any way I could. And yeah, it's been part of my journey here.
That's awesome.
That's in a nutshell.
And so, all right, so you kind of started as what am I trying to say here? I don't want to use the word tree hugger, a conservationalist, but it sounds like you probably hugged a lot of trees along the way.
Yeah, I've hugged trees. I've learned how to talk with them. Over time, it's interesting. I operate a chainsaw. I have since I was a kid. I remember doing my first chainsaw carving in high school. A guy had me carve he asked me to do a chief's head out of a stump in his yard, and I remember doing that. I don't remember when I first picked up a chainsaw. So it's an interesting relationship of hugging trees, but also knowing when to integrate as a human with them and use them for wood and materials, because I definitely value and appreciate my hands touching a piece of wood much more than a piece of plastic. So different things like that, there's like just, learning that integration. That's a big part of that is my own personal study and sharing that as I've studied it and observed it, the human interaction in nature, as opposed to oftentimes a scientist or a biologist will observe nature through a lens or in a petri dish or through an aquarium or a glass window, as opposed to putting themselves into it. So that's, a big part of what I like studying and involving myself in is how do we weave ourselves back into nature and being part of it and awaken that nature and conserving, using that word, conserving the nature in us.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that you mention not just, trying to save trees where necessary, but also using the chainsaw, because that turns just saving them for the sake of saving them into more of a stewardship with nature, where we're helping nature to be healthy, not just making sure every tree stands up. Does that make sense?
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I think a good example of that is observation I had up in the northern boreal forests. The people who live there have forests that go through about 20-year cycles, and then they'll come through and clear cut a 20-year cycle forest. And in those forests, there's all kinds of animals and fungal activity and multiple diverse species. And what they're doing when they harvest them at 20 years is using it to make the toilet paper for our nation, the newspaper for our nation. They're using it to make all the paper products that we use. And now we have this like idea that other things like hemp, I love the hemp plant, but if you plant a field of hemp, you're going to have a monocrop that you come and harvest every year. And that sounds more sustainable, but these people in the boreal forests are concerned about losing their ecosystems of these 20-year forest cycles to people wanting to clear them down, never let them grow back again, and having a hemp forest, like that just gets chopped down every year. So the animals will lose their migratory places they can go. Because, it's not like they're clearing the whole entire boreal forest every year.
Right.
There's, these movements of things. And so it's interesting, as, the big machine of the world, like, gets into our minds what these certain ideas are. It's nice to take a little closer look and see what some of the ramifications of these things will be to the people on the ground in the places there.
That is really interesting because, all right, so I know that when I was a kid, it was all about save the trees, which meant not using paper bags anymore at the grocery store. And so we all switched to plastic. Meanwhile, now we're kind of thinking the opposite way where, trees are actually, we can regrow forests in these like 20-year cycles just here in the United States or anywhere. And those trees are actually more sustainable than adding all these plastics to the world and that kind of thing. So they kind of tricked us on that one, didn't they?
Yeah, it's a mind game.
It sure is. So you're going to be able to explain this better than me. Can you tell me what that food forest adventure was all about, the one where we met?
Well, it was exactly that idea, bringing people integrated into nature, finding their natural selves. I watched people at the beginning of that class come as regular humans, and by the end of the class, the end of the weekend there, I watched them, walking around looking like forest giants and elves and fairies and, just awakening their more natural selves, and that creates like a sense of a whimsical magicness within themselves as well. Putting moss, on their shoulders and all kinds of things like that. But a big part of it was integrating with the forest, being able to observe and see how many different resources, how many different connections there are between different elements of the forest. Not always being human-centered, like this tree is good for us because it produces aspirin, or this tree is good for us because it helps us digest, or this plant root helps boost our immune system. It's more of looking at like, yeah, that's there, but this tree is also the home to this certain butterfly, and it's the only place that it can do that. And the trees that grow above it that drop acorns, producing, thousands of calories trickling down through the ecosystem there, from squirrels to, the worms that are eating the ones that are rotting on the ground, to the mushrooms that are eating the ones that are left behind. Just like all these different connections in between, and, waking in a sense to that, to be able to grow and observe and learn more afterwards on your own. So one of the things I got into at a fairly young age was the idea of interpretive services. And those are the people that work at parks, and they'll give you a presentation about like if you go to a park that has a mound, they'll give you a presentation about Native Americans, indigenous mound culture and what was there. And they'll talk to you about it for a half hour, just enough that when you leave there, you want to go learn more about it, or look it up on the internet and teach yourself more about it, or read more about it in a book. But to inspire and, encourage to a journey where you're learning more about these things that will benefit the greater ecosystem.
Yeah, and going to the Food Forest adventure was really interesting because the host, the guy who owns the land, his name's Owen. He's been a friend of mine here in Nashville for a few years.
Yeah.
And he's kind of living in his own, I don't want to say it's post-apocalypse because obviously the world is fine. Although over the last couple of years, it's been very helpful for him because he can just literally stay on that land, and he's like foraging food. He's got flowing water. He's got a whole setup there. Can you tell me a little bit about like why that spot is kind of a perfect survivor homestead?
Wow. Well, it's, he's got great relationships with his neighbors. He's got, there's at this time, like the survival aspect, like I always look at this post-apocalypse thing. I'll get into that more. I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
Just from teaching and working with preppers of all different sorts and exploring all different scenarios. The scenario that he's in right now, if you would say the apocalypse has happened, he's got deer running around. He's got clean water. With seasonal cycles, you have things coming and changing throughout the year. I think having that relationship with the neighbors, having community is an amazing aspect. If you're lacking in something, or if you have an abundance of something, you can get what you need.
Yeah, you mean like through trading or bartering with what you have in excess and getting what you need out of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
I mean, like when we were there that weekend, we found basket loads of a type of enoki mushroom, and it was enough to feed the whole group there, 30-something people. And there was plenty more that, neighbors were able to have some. And, that it's kind of brings forth, other people start bringing forth what their abundances are, what they might find on their land that day as well. And, it helps, that hunter-gatherer kind of aspect comes into play there.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of the neatest thing, and probably the core of what this Food Forest adventure was to me, at least, was we would go on these hikes. You Owen and a few other people that really knew their stuff would point out like, hey, this tree provides this food. Here's a plant that you can eat. Check out the fruits grown on this one, like totally edible and it's year round, that kind of thing. And then we would actually like forage some of this stuff, bring it back to the lodge and then incorporate that into the next meal, which was, I thought that was so cool.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the meals we made there was a soup. Or a big stew. I think those are great for large community meals of foraged items. You can put a lot of different things into a soup and add some salt, maybe a deer leg, to like get some oils into it. And I know one thing I remember from that weekend, it was mostly vegetarian because our main cook was vegan, so that's always a different take on things. I know myself, I was vegetarian years ago, but kind of experimented with other meats and being more open to eating whatever I felt like instead of putting myself into a disciplinary box of food.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. I mean, I often can almost view a lot of our choices that we have now as just absolutely mind-blowing. Just being able to choose to be a vegetarian in this world.
Yeah.
Being able to choose to be paleo. Being able to choose these things is such an affluent, like, wow, we get to do that. We can go to a grocery store right now and pick out fruits from other side of the world. We can get cans of like vegetables from any continent of the world.
Right, and it's shelf stable for years. I mean, there's an expiration date on them, but literally you could open up one of those cans in 20 years and you'd probably be fine to eat the whole thing.
Yeah, most likely. If not, you're probably in a situation where it's okay.
Right. So one of the other really unique things that happened at this Food Forest adventure was one of the co-hosts actually brought a still, which was pretty cool. Now, in this case, we were making tinctures, like taking some berries and some herbs, running that hot water through it, and then, what am I trying to say? Boiling it down, the whole thing. I'm missing the science here, but it's okay.
Well,
distilling it down.
Yeah, it was I guess commonly called floral essence or hydrosols.
Oh, gotcha. That's right.
Hydrosols are, so it's actually extracting the oils out of the plant and like concentrating it. You can run it through actually several times and get it into a more thicker oil concentrate.
Oh, right. Yeah, just keep on working it down.
Yeah, so we were doing spice bush. So we put spice bush twigs, leaves, and berries into it. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with spice berries, but they're a shrub that grows throughout the eastern hardwood forest, from the Great Plains all the way to the coast. Way south, I've seen them in forests in Georgia. I've seen them all the way up north in Michigan. So they're pretty readily available in some areas. I would say I would see more of them than others, like as a more higher percentage of the shrub layer. They're understory, they grow in the shade. But as a plant itself, it was originally known by the indigenous people as a friendship plant. So when one village would go and meet up with another village, they would make spice bush tea, and they called it friendship tea.
Nice.
So that was one significance that we as hosts found bringing that into a hydrosol that we could all take a sip of and share as a community and make a concentration of that. Also on the site there had historical moonshining. So using the still using the still there, we felt it was like a fun way to, incorporate prior people on the land there and what they had done in the past.
Right. Yeah. And now I'm kind of wondering if we could make a spice bush moonshine with that same still.
That'd be a friendly shine. Friend shine.
Friend shine. I like that.
Yeah. One of the other cool things, the twigs and leaves have been known for controlling and knocking back candida. Are you familiar with candida?
Yeah. So a little bit. I'm more and more all the time, right?
Right. So it's a yeast that turns into a mushroom and grows out inside of our bodies. So I could do a quick little story about that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it kind of plays in here well. It's a story I kind of made up out of realistic kind of things where it's like the outline of a story, basically, where so you got these mushrooms that are growing inside of people, and through archaeological evidence, it landed here about the same time as agriculture began. So you're talking like 10,000 BC-ish.
Yeah.
And so mushrooms have been proven to have spores that can travel through our stratosphere. They've been shown to be able to travel through space and especially be encapsulated in ice. So there's evidence that a comet had passed the Earth and perhaps distributed the spores onto the Earth at that time. And the mushroom, when it gets into us, it can actually change the way that you want to eat food. So things like carrots originally 12,000 years ago were white, fairly bitter, but had that similar carrot taste to them. And over time, through agriculture, we increased the sugar contents in a lot of things. And sugar definitely feeds candida. I think that's fairly commonly known. But if you look at what mushrooms grow on, it's dead things. So perhaps the mushrooms that are growing inside of us, they grow best when more cells are dead in us. So it's kind of like you're getting this alien kind of energy, this like spore coming in from outer space, right?
Yeah.
But then it's coming and it's making zombies out of us. And if it can, what's the best thing to explore the earth with? The human body's pretty appropriate. You can climb things, you can build things, you can do all kinds of things with the human body. You can explore pretty much most parts of the planet at this point. Sky, underwater. So perhaps some alien activity has come and is using these, it's a mushroom energy and it's using our bodies to explore. If it just keeps 10% of us alive and 90% of us is dead mushroom, then, you got basically a zombie walking around.
Well, have you seen the movie The Girl with All the Gifts?
I have not.
Oh, you're going to love this. This is a story. It's a zombie story, obviously post-apocalypse. It's actually happening during the apocalypse. And instead of it being like a viral infection, like most zombie movies are, this one happens to be a, I just lost it. Not candida. Come on. Floral.
Candida? Yeah.
No, there's bacteria, there's viruses, and a fungal. It's a fungal infection that turns people into zombies. It actually takes over their brains, and they're still alive. But yeah, I think you're gonna love it.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like it's like right up my alley here.
Yeah.
So one thing I think about too with this, like keeping only 10% of us alive, 90% dead. you think about like in like a story aspect, of apocalypse, and if you're exploring any kind of biblical realm of apocalypse, then you have this guy that's supposed to come and reawaken the dead. So it's amazing. Things like spice bush can actually knock the candida back and make a person have a higher percentage human and a less percentage mushroom. And there's other things out there, and like other herbs and plants. I mean, sunlight itself helps knock it back. Things like cabin fever, they happen to people a lot in February when there's not as much sunlight. Mm-hmm. And it's usually a result of the candida getting to their head and making them like just a little more depressed. There's not as much vitamin C in their bodies. Vitamin C knocks it back. They put vitamin C in apple juice in grocery stores, and it'll say fortified with vitamin C. But they really put that in there so no fungal growth will grow in the jug of apple juice, so it has longer shelf life.
It's just a preservative? Is that true?
Basically, yeah.
What?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
It's one of those things in permaculture we call stacking functions. It's, gives us the benefit of some extra vitamin C from a shelf-stored item, but it's also giving the thing longer shelf life.
That is wild. Huh. Well, I guess it's doing double duty then.
The spice bush's name is Lindera benzoin, and I think benzoinate is found in some foods as a preservative. So I don't know what the correlation there is, but the name, the botanical taxonomical name, kind of has a preservative name in it already.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's wild. Yeah. All right, so since we've delved into the apocalypse now, let's say tomorrow the entire world's supply chain falls apart. So we don't know what the apocalypse is, but there's no food being delivered, there's no new tools being made, there's no gasoline being refined. What would be your survival strategy from day one?
Well, depending on the whole scenario, I mean, with all these factors going into things right now, I really like where I am in this part of the world. I'm in the Midwest, and we get rain still, and we have great lakes full of fresh water. That's, founding building block of creating food. But I mean, most parts of the world I've been to down in the desert, Sonoran Desert, and there's food everywhere. You can learn how to identify plants fairly quickly, identify things around you, and feel fairly safe and comfortable. Right now, I definitely recommend people to try to learn to identify things, pick up some books, because if the internet does shut down, then you're going to lose that resource of being able to look things up. But yeah, I think there's food everywhere, and it's the hardest part is for people to adapt to new foods. There's, a lot of things. I think of apples. Where I live here in the Midwest, apples are really hard to grow. They used to grow well 150 years ago, so it's still considered this old traditional thing to have apple pie. But everybody's getting their apples from Washington.
Oh, funny.
The apple orchards where I live are heavily sprayed. There's funguses that try to eat them. There's just so many things going into them. In fact, the old apple orchards often are considered brownfields, contaminated soil.
Whoa.
Heavy metals. So yeah, I think it's a big thing, adapting and changing in the world. And people have done it before. We've always done it. In Europe, when there was way too many people and too much agriculture, like turning the soil, they got really into the plow in about the early 1400s, late 1300s. They were plowing heavy. And what that did was filled the water with a lot more soot. So people couldn't go down to the river or the creek and harvest salmon anymore. So it wasn't until the 1400s people were going out to the deep sea to eat cod. People didn't even eat cod 800 years ago. Maybe some people did, of course, but there wasn't a need to go out to the deep sea to catch cod. So it's interesting. People have adapted before to different foods. Right now, it's going to be much more challenging if the supply chain cuts, because we're very acclimated to going to the store, getting whatever we want 365 days of the year.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like you would be thinking, be ready to adapt and just have as much collected knowledge as you can have. And you're right about that. The internet thing, like, we're all cyborgs at this point, and there's an entire part of our brain that's really dependent on not just electricity, but especially for the World Wide Web to just be up and running. Because we can theoretically make our own electricity, right? We can run a generator or that kind of thing, but we can't make our own World Wide Web. That kind of relies on other people making sure their electricity is up and all these cables running everywhere. So,
one of the films that I'm currently watching is Section 11, and they're downloading Wikipedia and stuff as fast as they can before it goes down.
I've been watching that show. I'm not caught up, but I'm loving it. I think it's just really good.
I really like it too. At first I was having a hard time with how they jump around on the timelines. But I'm really liking it now. It's a fun story.
Yeah. And as it keeps going, I love that, it's already in. Well, you're right. It does bounce around because you have an entire storyline from the actual apocalypse as it happens, and then there's like early post-apocalypse storylines, and then there's late, 15, 20 years later, where people have kind of figured out how to survive, and now you have these bands of survivors that are working together, trying to recreate what some of them remember from the old world, while the new ones are trying to, just live in the only world that they know. I think it's really fascinating. I'm loving the show.
Right.
But you're right. During the actual apocalypse, they have a moment where they're like, I'm going to try to download Wikipedia. And what do you get through? Like D or G or something like that before power ran out?
It's like internet's down.
I don't even know how you would do that. I was like, shoot, I'm pretty tech savvy. But if someone was like, hey, can you make a copy of Wikipedia real quick? I'd be like, I can do one page at a time, get some screenshots, maybe copy and paste text.
Is it like in some like memory stack in some building somewhere?
Well, I'm sure it is. Yeah. I guess if you could get into a server room somewhere that happens to have a copy of Wikipedia, which there's several copies, all around the world. I guess that would be one way to get it as a whole. Yeah. But then what do you do with that? What do you do with this server?
Right.
Yeah. Not a bad idea though.
Turn it into a cooking device or something.
That's true. With it. Yeah. Maybe start mining Bitcoin with it. You mentioned that being in the Midwest would be a good place to get stuck in should an apocalypse happen today. What area would you definitely not pick?
I mean, it's challenging because, and I'll say that because I said I was gonna come back to this, so here we are. I've been teaching these permaculture and foraging kind of classes. A lot of people that are attracted to those things are into prepping, and I've heard a lot of different scenarios of what people think is going to happen. My father was he's retired now, but he was an air quality climate scientist, so I've been hearing about climate change since I was like a baby.
Yeah.
So I've heard so many things come and go, people calling it global warming, people getting upset about that. Some people saying global warming is going to be great because it'll go back to how it was when the dinosaurs were here and the plants will grow crazy. Some places are going to get cold. Some places are going to get hot. I saw a day a couple years ago where it was 45 degrees in Alaska, in Anchorage, and it was 26 degrees in Orlando.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty mind-blowing just to see how things can switch and change.
Right.
There's the whole concept, of coastal towns and glacial melt. Like, are they going to be underwater? And I know some of these towns are already having town meetings and city meetings planning for that.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
what are they going to do as the water rises?
And we're kind of seeing that already in Florida with the building that collapsed. They're saying that seawater intrusion had a big part to play in that.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't read about that. That's neat.
Oh, man.
It's not neat, but it's
don't
like...
Yeah, don't look
makes
that one up.
sense.
That's a tragedy and a half.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing I explore right now, too. We as humans being linked in with the news, being linked in with the internet, we experience all the emotions of these things that are happening all around the world, where at another time in the world, most times in the world, we'd be living in a valley with our family and we'd be hearing stories about what was on the other side of the mountain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now we're like feeling the heartache of every tornado, every earthquake, every building that falls, every hurricane. Like it's a lot to hold on to, and I do believe we have a lot of capacity and empathy and compassion as humans to hold that, but I can see it being very trying for some people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, besides the fact that, bad... Hold on one sec. That's my phone. It's supposed to be on quiet.
Yeah, no problem.
Besides
Sounded like a ferry going by or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. There we go. All right, fix that. Let me take a quick note here so I know to get rid of it. There we go. And now I lost my spot. What was I just saying? Come on.
We were talking about different ideas, different parts of the world.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Emotional impact of feeling the whole world.
Yep, that puts me back. All right, cool. Yeah, because most of the news that we hear is bad news, right? Because if it bleeds, it leads. And so we are kind of always hearing just the worst of the worst out in the world,
right.
Especially the further you get away from local news, the more it's just the bad news.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of times I notice with the news too, I don't remember it being this way, but I feel like there's a lot of predictive news.
What do you mean?
Where I remember news being like, this happened, where now they're saying this might happen. Like, especially with like the coronavirus, they're like, there might be an outbreak next week. Where in the past it would have been like, there's an outbreak last week.
Right.
If that makes sense, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like they're doing a lot of preemptive exploration through news headlines.
Right. Well, it's kind of like, I'm going to get in totally the wrong genre here, but when you invest in something, you buy the rumor, sell the news, right? So the news is all about like hyping people up for stuff, like
right.
Hurricane's coming next week. Here's how you can be prepared, that kind of thing. And then the hurricane comes, it's like, oh, that was a flop, but they don't say that. It's just like, oh, that was okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And really all they're doing is crying wolf over and over and over again. So when the real one happens, that's why people in Florida are like, I'm going to stay in my seaside condo during this hurricane, no problem.
Yep.
Because the last one was no big deal after they hyped it up.
Yeah, it was the one they had recently here near me. It was in Kentucky, all the tornadoes that came through. And
oh, yeah.
They had a weather warning go out, but, it's just like people see a, storm warning around here. Like, oh, okay, it's probably fine. But, yeah. I don't know. I don't remember how many tornadoes it was, but it was a lot.
It was a lot, yeah. And now that I live in Tornado Alley for the first time in my life, it's been really interesting getting used to this whole new natural disaster that I had never really experienced before.
Yeah.
When I first got to LA, it was all about earthquakes, and for me, earthquakes were generally kind of fun. Mostly because I never lived through one where there was any real destruction and no one ever died from it. But now we got these tornadoes that are going right by the house and people are dying left and right. And it's something that you got to grasp and, wrap your mind around a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
still remember being out in California and people in San Francisco just being totally content that at any moment an earthquake could come, and San Francisco is built on sand dunes, and
yep.
they just get swallowed up.
Yeah, and 99% of the time you're just living life.
Yep.
Yeah. So I didn't get an answer from you, and I kind of want to go back to this because
let's go back to this.
I
We
want
went
you
off on a side tangent there.
We sure did. Yeah. So if you happen to be in the middle of the desert where there's no water, there's very little vegetation, which also means that there's very little actual animal life. Do you think you could survive there?
I think I could. There's it always depends on what resources are accessible. There's ways where you can dig a pit and collect whatever kind of vegetative material you can find, put it in the pit, cover it with plastic, put a rock on top of it with a bowl underneath where the rock is. So as the sun hits all that vegetation, it's going to evaporate, hit the plastic, and drip down to where the rock is by gravity and drip into the bowl. So you'll be able to access water that way. There's other things. There's a story I always keep in my mind. There was two. This is one of those parable or proverb kind of stories where two men crossed the desert. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. One of them put a few rocks in his mouth. The other one didn't. The guy that had a couple rocks in his mouth survived and made it to an oasis. The other one didn't make it. Why? It's because having those rocks in his mouth caused salivation in his mouth, which kept the fluids in his body circulating, where the other guys didn't circulate anymore, so it dried up, got clogged up. So there's a lot of little things like that they're really simple strategies to stay alive in desert situations.
Oh, that's pretty fascinating. I remember as a kid, I would put a rock in my mouth, and I forget who. I think it was my grandmother suggested it. She was like, "Oh, if you're thirsty, just put a rock in your mouth." And I did it.
That's cool.
And it would work for a little while. You'd salivate on the rock. Of course, you suck down a little bit of dirt along the way. But I actually tried this.
Sometimes that's a little extra mineral boost.
Yep. So. Sometimes you just need to get some limestone in you.
I remember reading about the people in concentration camps in World War II putting all kinds of weeds into big pots of water. They pick dandelion leaves, but then they would add a nail into it. And as they brewed the pot of soup, basically the nail would add extra iron into it, which helped keep a lot of them alive.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no multivitamins in a concentration camp.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually some early multivitamin companies that started in the 50s came from Jews that had lived in concentration camps and were creating those things.
Oh, wow. I didn't think that was going to connect, but well done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Oh, there's other fascinating stories from other hard places to live that I always think of. There's the story of the Inuit man who was lost out in the snow with his two sled dogs, and he took a poop and shaped his poop into a knife, let it freeze, and killed one of his dogs, ate it.
Oh no.
It's terrible, but it made him so he could keep going, and dog's man's best friend, so maybe the dog was honored, and I'm sure spirit of the dog was honored and was still walking with him. But it's a fascinating story, this to make a blade out of that. Yeah,
that pretty. I don't know why you wouldn't find ice somewhere and make it a chip of ice. It seems like there should be some
all fluffy snow, or I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure he exhausted every option by the time he was like, I'm going to make a sword out of my poo. and then he had to sharpen it, right? Or he had to get some kind of a point on it.
Yeah. chip it down somehow. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though, but yeah, back on the main topic here of
No, we're gonna stay on this poop knife for a second because
okay.
now I'm thinking even more. And once
Now we're talking shit.
Now, yes. Because all right, let's say you slaughter the dog. The knife was good for that. Now the dog's dead. But here comes the next problem. Now you actually have to like pull a piece of meat off this dog.
Yeah,
And
you gotta
are
eat it raw.
Yeah, well, you got to eat it raw, but you got to cut it
warm.
Are you also cutting it off with this poop knife?
Maybe.
I've got questions, Andy. I've got
important
questions.
Are you concerned that you might get like E. coli poisoning or something from?
Well, that's one of my concerns, but the other one is as you're cutting into this.
Oh yeah, is it gonna melt?
Yeah, because the dog's warm. You wouldn't wait for it to freeze because then you couldn't cut it at all.
Well, maybe
so the
you get
dog's
it open
warm
enough that you can get a bone off of it that's sharp enough to tear into something.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But like I've tried to pull the meat off of a chicken without use of a sharp knife, and it is not easy.
A raw chicken, yeah.
Yeah, raw chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not easy. And apologies to all of my animal-loving friends out there. This is just where we're going with this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
but that's part of it, right? Because if you got to survive, you're gonna have to do some dirty things.
Yeah, I mean, there's the other story where a guy goes out and didn't do that, and his dog ate him. So we can enjoy that story too.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, a little vindication for our dog lovers out there.
Right.
Oh man.
And where we're at right now, enjoying a conversation, we can enjoy both of those.
Yeah, we can applaud one man for doing what he had to survive, and we can applaud the dogs for doing what they had to.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. And then they probably had their quick snack and then just found themselves a nice little cave to curl up in, and they were good. Like the dogs are going to be fine.
Right. They're furry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're made for it.
But yeah, like speaking of different climates and different places. And the aspect of looking at what is there. Seasonally, foods come and go. And if you're adapting yourself to your environment, it's amazing how many things are presenting themselves right when you need it. For example, the white pine, its vitamin C content in the needles are the highest when February is around. So right when that cabin fever kind of concept's kicking in, you can be collecting some white pine needles, eating them, or more easily steeping them in water and drinking the extract of vitamin C and sulfur compounds as well, which are really good for you. The MSM. There's things I always think of. I was digging Echinacea Roots again on when the September 11th towers came down. I was out in the field digging Echinacea Roots. It's when the medicinal properties are the highest. That's also the season late September. Shortly after that, in October, is when you start seeing flu cases go up. You know, that change of weather. So there's a lot of things like that. Like pawpaws, one of my favorite native tree fruits to the area where I'm at in the eastern hardwood forest. It's like a real fatty fruit, almost custardy like, and that helps build your body up for the winter. So then there's other things too. We live in I'll get back to this. Okay, we live in a world where the forests are changing. So it's hard to eat a traditional diet. We really have to start adapting to these new forests. And I go out in the woods in my back fields here, and there is plants from every continent. I like to joke that I even have an ice machine on my refrigerator, so I even got that continent covered, Antarctica.
Nice.
But it's, there's, so this whole seasonal eating, there's tons of greens in the spring. So all different kinds of greens are coming up in the spring. That's a great time for spring cleaning your digestive system from eating more dried fruits and meats throughout the winter. More heavy foods in the winter, and then all of a sudden there's all these greens coming in, you're like excited, so you're eating them and they help clean you out and open you up. And then the fruits come in the summer and they cool you down. There's things like purslane, they grow in drier areas around here in the sun, and they have the highest amount of omega-3s in them. They protect your skin from the sun. There's compounds in kale and other greens that protect themselves from the sun, and when you eat them, you get those into your skin as well. It's different for everybody. Every human body has its own way of processing these things, and there's different allergies, and everybody's different. So it's you got to find your own things there.
Yeah, gotcha.
So yeah, what do you think about that?
It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting because does nature provide because we need it, or do we need it because nature provides? Which one's helping which one there?
This comes back to what I'm trying to say is we are nature. And
I forget that sometimes.
You know what I mean? It's it's not like nature's providing it for us. I mean, it's we are nature, so it all makes sense. We've co-evolved with nature for eons. Right. I mean, we used to go out hanging with our homies and we'd go and catch a mastodon. Before that, before we even knew how to do that, we would go and find one that was already dead and tear it apart and make stuff out of it.
Right.
It's so many different things. There's one thing, when I was being choosy about different foods I was eating in my early 20s, I was a raw food, pretty much vegan raw food, but I ate honey and other things. I wasn't too concerned about the vegan label, but I was really into the not eating cooked food. It was kind of one of my first, go a little farther, Andy. One of the things I experienced, I had a lot of other friends and cohorts that were into raw foods, but they were buying a lot of tropical fruit from grocery stores like pineapples and whatnot. I was already foraging and making sure I was eating something local, in my forest ecosystem around me, wherever I was, every day. And I came to find just even at night or even in my daydreams, I was thinking about the local forest. I was thinking about local history, the local tribes that had lived in the land where I was, things like that, where my friends were thinking about tropical vacations. So yeah. I found it interesting, what you're putting into you is the nature. If you're eating stuff that's coming out of a tropical environment, your body thinks it's in a tropical environment. Well, at least part of it does. I mean, you're still breathing in the microbes of the local environment, so it's kind of confused a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's something there.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Let me see something here because we've kind of talked about a couple different possibilities, but what would you say is the most likely real world apocalypse that could happen today? And I'm talking about the kind that does wipe out 90% plus of the population.
Wow.
I know, and there's a lot of options nowadays, right?
Coming from a biological kind of standpoint, I think the big part is microorganisms like bacteria,
like revolting against us,
viruses, things of that type of nature. That, I mean, there's so many different ones out there. It's fascinating. There was a study done where they did soil probes down in the middle of the ocean a year ago, and they found microorganism bacteria that were over 100 million years old. They were still alive, dormant. They fed them, and they started replicating.
Wait, why would they feed them? I'm just kidding. I know what scientists have to do. They have to find out.
They want to see. Yeah, they want to see. So, I mean, I'm not concerned that those particular bacterias, and I don't think they were either, were going to come out and be something that attacked us. But it really exemplifies how resilient these microorganisms are.
Yeah.
And the more we create, I mean, humans are a huge species influencing and impacting the ecosystem right now. We create what are known as corridors. There's things like trains, they'll go from one city to another. And, when you have a train like that, there's things like the underground in London, a new species of mosquito evolved that lives under there.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fascinating. It apparently doesn't live on human blood, I think. I might be mixing that up with another one.
Well, that's good. Yeah, let's hope for that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, correlations,
Yeah, the last thing we need is
like the
vampiric
rat populations.
Yeah.
Like the rat populations in New York City were struggling during the coronavirus pandemic because there wasn't as much food waste out on the streets from restaurants and all these kinds of things. So it's just interesting how there's all these correlations between that. But yeah, I think the microorganism world is less understood by us as well.
Right.
And we usually don't study something like malaria until there's a malaria outbreak.
Yeah, because especially,
what I mean?
Yeah, especially us here in the first world, we've been pretty coddled when it comes to diseases. As in, we live in a relatively clean place where our food is also kept very clean overall. I mean, not at Taco Bell at 3 a.m., but most of the time it's pretty clean.
Right.
But yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, coronavirus kind of blindsided a lot of the world, and we saw that. We only did a 50% response to it, as in only 50% of the people-ish seemed to care. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting because something worse could come around. I don't think it would be as bad.
Right.
Like, I think, as far as in written history goes, the Black Plague would probably be about the worst that we've seen.
Right.
And if it came around again today, we would have a much better response to it. We would be able to do a lot more as far as like preventative and remedy. But yeah, if something worse than that came around and it was something novel that we just didn't know what to do with, especially if it was bacterial or fungal,
right.
where you can't just get a vaccine for it. When you're talking about bacteria, we've been living off of antibiotics for the last 70 years, give or take. And, every year we get this news thing that's like antibiotics aren't working anymore, or there's this new superbug that's resistant and that kind of thing. So, I think we've got viruses pretty well under control, but yeah, bacteria and fungus
now we're
could
hearing
come
about new variants all the time of viruses.
Oh, totally.
So
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah. At least they're getting weaker.
That's one of the biological concepts, or like considered like a nature law of escapism. So that's something that we've kind of run out of now, is our ability to escape things. We've pretty much filled the earth and all the different places that we could go. There's, pretty much most parts of the world have some sort of human impact on them. The people living on space stations, they still have to put their poop in a bucket and bring it back home. The idea of escaping to Mars is really fascinating to a lot of people, I think. But even so, there's going to be microbials that go with us there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one too. Like the idea of escaping to Mars, because I mean, the Earth would have to get pretty damn bad for Mars to start looking good.
Right.
Like
I mean, we can still walk around without a spacesuit here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're probably, I don't know what the real world case is, but it would take a lot for us to be like, Mars is looking really good right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that that's a real viable solution for anybody anytime. Definitely not in our lifetimes.
Right.
Maybe in another 1,000 years or something when everything is different, but Yeah, there's no
Can't
escaping
even
this.
fathom.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you look around the universe and you say, all right, how many blue planets are there that have oxygen and water and can sustain life? Like right now, we know of one.
Right.
So this is it. So I'm gonna kind of throw another question at you. What is something that every post-apocalypse movie gets wrong?
Well, one thing I often see in post-apocalyptic films is this idea that if you have like a 10 by 12 hydroponic system, that you're going to be fine. Because you'll be able to because I've worked with those things before. You might be able to create a little bit of food, but to supply some of the food needs that you're seeing in the movie of like how many people are trying to eat off of that 3 tomato plants and 17 lettuce heads.
Right.
It's very interesting. You know, they'll be like in a bomb shelter and they'll have all the guns you can fathom, but they'll have like 10 tomato plants and they'll be like, we're going to be fine.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more needed there. I think places like old abandoned malls could be turned into indoor farms with giant ponds that, you know, you can pull like 50 fish out of every day. You know, then maybe you can start talking about feeding, 100 people or something. But they should look a lot skinnier than they do in some of these movies.
Yeah. Hold on one sec. My cat is literally meowing at my window. Yeah, he's being a dick. So I'm gonna go let him in real quick. Give me 1 second. Hey survivors, Makeshift here to remind you that the Apocalypse Post is brought to you in no small way by our Patreon supporters. Join the ranks for early access and exclusive content with support levels now named for fancy Fallout-ridden factions like the $2 per creation Drifter or the $7 Wastelander. Knowing you've got my back has helped me dedicate more time to this channel, spreading love of the post-apocalypse and less time on stupid real-world stuff. Sign up right now at patreon.com/theapocalypsepost. Cats are the bane of every podcast ever. All right, so I'm really fascinated that you brought that up because, first point, a lot of malls have like that glass ceiling, so they're already kind of greenhouses. Right. And then second, I was looking this up beforehand because I wanted to know, and permaculture.com says that to feed one person for a year, you need 5 to 6 acres. And for a family of 4, you need about 13. So yeah, it is pretty funny that, you could not farm enough food in like an underground bunker. It just can't be done.
Right.
And I guess one movie that kind of got that right, but didn't go quite far enough would be A Quiet Place. Because they actually had they were on a farm, they had, fields growing, but it looks like maybe, an acre or 2 tops for that family of 4.
Quiet Place.
Yeah. Have you seen that one?
I have not. I'm going to check that out.
There's 2 installments of it now. It is, I think, they kind of created their own genre with it. It's a monster movie, post-apocalyptic, but they're going to do good things with it. And yeah, cool. It's really good. It's John Krasinski from The Office.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, he stars in the first one. He wrote and directed both, I believe.
There's one I thought was interesting that they played into was I can't remember what it's called, but it was about a train driving through the snow.
Oh yes, it's Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer, that's it. I was going to say Snow Chaser, but but yeah, the people in the back, they're eating these bars made out of wormy like bugs.
Yeah, bugs. Yep.
So that's I feel is a food of the future because it's amazing how much protein that can be generated with very small amounts of water.
Oh yeah, small amounts of water, and they'll eat literally anything. You could throw whatever scraps you've got. Anything. You could throw wood in there. Yeah, you could throw dead bodies in there.
Any organic material. Yeah, they'll turn it into something tasty.
Exactly. Well, I don't have a whole lot of bugs in my diet except for the ones that happen to be on the strawberries I get from the store. I don't know how tasty they are, grasshoppers have to be covered in chocolate for most people to eat them. Same thing with ants. But I guess some bugs are supposed to actually taste pretty good.
Well, that's part of it too, the taste, and that might be even something to do with the adaptability I'm talking about. Like, I don't know how I'd be able to adapt to being stuck in a train car eating worms the rest of my life. I'd probably look for the nearest poison to take myself out with. But some other scenarios would be more enjoyable for me, I would say.
Yeah.
But there is, I have noticed I've acquired a taste for bitter. I think most people only enjoy bitter coffee.
Or cocktails.
Or cocktails
with
bitters in it, yeah. But like if you eat a bitter green out in the forest, people are like, nah, I don't want that. But I've noticed as I've eaten more bitters and wild foods, the sweeter these bitter things actually have tasted for me.
Oh, that's interesting.
The other thing I've compared, like if I eat a chunk of kale leaves or something, shortly after I have a really sweet flavor in my mouth. Where if I eat like your typical birthday cake at a kid's birthday party, very shortly after I have the most bitter, foul taste in my mouth.
That's interesting. And no, I agree wholeheartedly.
And you want some water or something else to, give me a glass of milk.
But yeah, the taste after a glass of milk is not that pleasant either.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's an interesting aspect there.
Yeah. Oh, fun. All right, cool. Let's see. We're quickly approaching an hour. I don't want to take up your whole night, but I've got a couple more questions for you. If you're still good to go. Yeah. All right. So here's what I want to know. You're a guy who could literally survive off of foraging. You could do, mushrooms and all, get your greens and, find bugs if you had to. But I want to know, what is your guilty pleasure? Like if you lived on a completely sustaining forest farm, what's the one thing you would still head to Walmart or Kroger for?
Well, I feel there's certain things like that could be accomplished through greater community. I think one of my guilty pleasures is kombucha. I've tried to make it, and it turns out a little bit vinegary compared to the kombucha I buy at the grocery store.
Oh, gotcha. That's interesting.
Because
isn't it supposed to taste a little vinegary?
Probably.
But yeah, I guess the commercialized version of it.
Store, they're really fun, fuzzy drinks. I pour it into a nice glass, and it's a special little, indulgence.
Right. That's funny. I was not gonna. I didn't think that was gonna be it. I thought it was gonna be something like marshmallows or like chocolate bars or something like that. But no, you went with another completely healthy thing.
I have learned how to make marshmallows out of the actual marshmallow plant.
Really?
And I put a lot of things like that together. That's how they I imagine they evolved into what marshmallows are now. Because imagine a tubular root, and you cut it up into sections, and then you boil it with maple syrup or sugar, and you're making a tea, a sweet tea that you're going to drink medicinally. And it's really good for your digestive system, your mucous membranes. And then what's left over in the pot after you drink that is marshmallows, these little tubular roots that puff up and have some of the sweetener soaked into them, so you can go stick them on a stick and cook them on a fire.
And wait, so you can take that product and turn it into like the sugary campfire marshmallows we know today?
It's very different. But
oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
I would say it's a little bit more bitter, but it's what the marshmallows of today kind of originated from, and what's closely still related is the name.
Got it.
and the presentation, that tubular shape that's cut into little sections.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
wild.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoy other things. Like after 3 years of doing the raw food thing, my sister had made a bunch of chocolate chip cookies, and That was my first cooked food I ate after 3 years of not.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's a great first food. How did it go? Was your body like okay with it?
Yeah, I definitely felt it. I remember the first time I ate cheese after that, I felt it go into my blood. I had some cheesy ravioli.
Really?
And it just like felt my bloodstream just slow down.
What?
It was quite an experience.
That's wild. Yeah, because I've definitely heard about like vegetarians when they have their first bite of meat after a while, like they'll have to kind of have like just a little bit at first because their stomach just won't take it.
Yeah, there's things like sausage. The sage in sausage is, traditional sausage would have like 40% or more sage in it. So, as I transitioned to eating more meats, I was also eating a lot more sage because there's compounds in it that help our digestive system digest meats better. And I would even say now I still predominantly more am like a jerky eater, dried fish, like smoked fish kind of guy. I'm not, cooking myself a steak too often, but, I'll bite into something. Yeah, it's, I'm open to it. It's just like a textural thing sometimes for me.
Gotcha. Well, I've got a kind of an out there question for you since you kind of brought up like digestive issues. When we go to Wasteland Weekend, it's in the Mojave Desert. And for most of us, we're going from, our air-conditioned houses out to this desert location where you're outdoors 100% of the time, unless you've got a camper with like AC and whatever.
Right.
And what's interesting that happens right away is you kind of lose your appetite. You have to force yourself to drink water because your body almost forgets to tell you that you're thirsty. And after a day or two, you end up with this desert bloat. Like you're not able to, and here's the third reference this episode, you're not able to poop. Everyone's first poop on site is like this big, like, it's like, yay,
cow
I pooped
patty
today. Well, I wasn't going for a full description, but
description,
yeah.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So what, do you have a remedy for that? Like what should we be doing different? Because I'm going to guess you might say bring some sage, throw it in their meat.
I mean, that makes sense. Sage does grow in the desert, so I mean that could be something available even there.
Yeah.
Another thing I've seen, you can add a little bit of salt to water, and it adds a little of an electrolyte to it, and that might help your water absorb better.
Yeah, that's definitely been one of the tricks is to do that.
I mean, of course, if you add too much, then it's like drinking salt ocean water, and you don't absorb
right.
that. But that would actually make you poop if you drank some salt, like a cup of salty water. It's basically upstairs colonic as opposed to a downstairs one.
Okay.
And it's just like a blast of water would come through and just move things.
Yeah.
But greens, I think some greens. There's a lot of little tricks like sugary foods like fruits you'll want to eat first, and then because they'll kind of like trigger movement. If you're eating a bunch of peanut butter or something, or if you're eating a steak and then you eat a bunch of apples afterwards, it could cause the bloating, like a situation like that, because the sugars will be trying to gas out and like move through quickly, but they're running into like peanut butter, So yeah, that's interesting though with the sun, the heat out there.
Yeah, well, you're just dehydrated. I think that's a big part of it.
Aloe vera juice might be a good thing to go in with the first day.
Okay.
That's really,
you actually made me think of something
succulent.
too, is because meat is such a big part of the culture there that I think I eat like my diet quickly turns into 75% meat, whereas at home it's probably like 10 or 20% meat,
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's we're probably just shocking our bodies every time we get out onto one of these events.
Yeah, I think that can be a good thing sometimes. It depends on how you go through it all.
Right. All right, cool.
There was one other plant I wanted to mention about in this seasonal food thing that I think is quite magical. It's It's from Europe, but it grows in the eastern hardwood forest, and a lot of ecologists don't like it because of its invasive properties. It's invading our forests. It's
Right.
the garlic mustard or mustard garlic. I've heard people say it both ways. It's a green leafy plant. It's a biannual. It'll produce its seed in the second year. So if you see
wow.
it growing, you have a year to, clear it out before it seeds and makes thousands of itself. But the leaves of it, when you eat them, the leaf itself has been shown to lower the freezing temperature of water from 32 Fahrenheit down to 28 Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow.
So I always like to think about things like that and find those little magic things in the world. Eat that. It shows up in the winter. I can harvest it sometimes when it's snowing out, and it's out there. So just nibbling something like that, putting it into my body, which, they say our bodies are like more than 85% water. It makes me feel like I would be able to hang outside and, be the last one to freeze to death.
I think we need to do a study on this now.
Yeah, let's experiment on our bodies with that.
Yeah, just go put ourselves in a frozen river and see who lasts longer.
Well, then you can mix in all those things like the breath work and whatnot.
Right.
The Wim Hof breath work method, I guess, helps you stay warm in cold water longer and warms your body internally from your breathing.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy's he's got some very interesting skills, doesn't he?
Sure. It's like, thanks for bringing that.
What?
Thanks for bringing that to the table.
Awesome. All right. Well, I do want to wrap things up. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you, find out more about your work, and
Sure.
how they can hire you to show them around their backyards?
Well, my most active internet place is Wake the Farm Up on Instagram. So it's that little @Wake the Farm Up. So you can direct connect with me there and see some interesting things. I usually do a story there, so you might go to it and it doesn't look like I post a lot. I just don't do a lot of permanent posts. I do keep a continuous story there. Pretty, sometimes I take a day or two where I don't. But I'm showing things that I've found in the forest, ideas, funny stuff, all connected with that. And I'm hireable for homestead consultations. It's the idea, wake the farm up. It's a fun phrase, but I actually help wake farms up.
Awesome.
And I play with the word farm, but I'm definitely into encouraging. You brought up that earlier, eco-encouragement. I like to encourage people that are doing things ecologically sound, and that's probably the best place to find me. There's
Awesome.
Other ways you can look up Wake the Farm Up and find some other things I've done on there.
Sweet.
I am in Indiana, so if that's convenient or local enough for you, let me know. But I do travel, so
Got it. Oh, very
Be
cool.
happy
Yeah,
to.
I know that you made it down to Tennessee for the event down here.
yeah, it's great people there.
Fantastic. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Andy, for coming on and sharing some knowledge with us and teaching us about how to survive in a real world apocalypse.
Hey, I'd love to do it again sometime too. I imagine me and you could talk about this for hours.
Oh my gosh, could we ever?
Keep finding new aspects to explore.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy the Elf, for joining me today, and thank you all out there for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to share it with your friends. If you hated it, share it with your enemies, along with a cup full of that first poop from a desert festival. I'll see you next time, survivors. Stay alive.
And days and days and days and days and